In this lesson, we are going to learn how to use the image trace feature and convert bitmap graphics into vector graphics. We'll also explore grouped objects and compound paths and see how they differ. If you'd like to follow along, please open Image Tracing Groups Compounds from the Chapter 2 subfolder of your Project Files folder located on your desktop. Let's start by talking about image tracing. When CS2 was released, Illustrator introduced a new and exciting feature called Live Trace. This new feature allowed us to turn bitmap objects made out of pixels, into vector paths and shapes. With the release of CS6, the feature has been renamed from Live Trace to Image Trace, and it comes with its very own panel of options. Alright, without further ado, let's trace an image. First, make sure you have the Logo 2 layer selected. That's where your image will be placed. Next, we need to get an image inside of Illustrator. So what we'll do is go over to the File menu and choose Place. Then we need to find a JPEG. So let's scroll down this list and look for Paw Print JPEG. Select it, make sure the link is unchecked on the bottom left of this dialog box, and choose Place. And I'll move that into place. So let's make a copy of our selected JPEG. If you're on a PC, you can hold down your Alt key, Option on a Mac, and with your paw print JPEG selected, click and drag your mouse down, and that will duplicate your selected object, and we'll use that shortly. Alright, let's go back up here and select this guy. Now what we want to do is actually break this JPEG down into vector art. Notice over in the Layers panel that this came in as an image, so Illustrator knows that we are working with a raster image. When we have a raster image selected, we don't need to deal with any kind of color settings or auto coloring. We just want to really deal with black and white. And here are some presets that are used very often. Let's choose one of these. For our particular graphic, even though it isn't a photo, the low fidelity photo and high fidelity photo presets seem to work the best. So I'm going to just choose high fidelity photo. When we let go of the mouse, that's step 1. Illustrator is letting us see how this particular trace is going to look. If we're happy with that, step 2 is to go back to the control panel and click Expand. Your raster graphic is now vector, so let's deselect. If you run your cursor over the image, now instead of one raster graphic, you are going to see points and paths, and that lets you know that indeed it did break down into vector. Another thing that you can do is look down in the Layers panel. Remember earlier when we had a regular JPEG or a raster graphic, it just says image here, and now we have a grouped object. Now if we open the twisty, you'll see all of the parts, all of the pieces and the paths that make up our vector object that we just ran a trace on. Alright, well we don't need that for now. Let's close that back up. Now let's experiment with another preset. And this time, instead of just using the preset as it is, maybe we can customize it to see what other kind of effects that we can get. Let's start by selecting the graphic on the bottom, and then let's look up in the control panel and notice where the image trace button is, and to the right of that we'll click the little arrow. Well, this time let's see what shades of gray will provide. And that works really nice, except we have a few toes that are missing. Well, this is when we can customize the preset and get a better result. So let's go up here to the control panel again and click the Image Trace panel. And when the Image Trace panel opens, we'll be able to customize our result. There are a lot of different settings over here, and you may notice as you hover over each of the settings, you'll get a little pop-out that tells you exactly what the settings do. Let's go down to the Advanced section and click the twisty to open it. And let's see what happens if we take our noise level down a little bit, maybe to around 9 or 10 pixels. And just like that, you start to see some of the toes appear. Alright, that looks great. There are many other settings that you could experiment with as well until you get the result that you're looking for. Let's go up here to grayscale and see if it makes a difference if we maybe go from grayscale to black and white. And indeed it did. Some of the toes that were gray are now black. Well, that looks pretty good. So why don't we go ahead and close the Image Trace panel, and to see the full result, we'll go up here to the Expand button again, and expand it. And now, just like that, we have two sets of paw prints. We've used a preset on the top and a customized trace on the bottom. So whichever one you think looks the best, that's the one you can keep. Personally, I think the one on the top is the winner. So let's delete the bottom image. All right, let's talk about grouped objects. Now we've seen the grouped objects appear in the Layers panel because when we traced over our JPEG, the objects in the JPEG became a grouped object. Now you might be wondering why we need grouped objects and why they're important. Well, sometimes when you have multiple objects, it's easier to group them so you can do things like move them together and keep them together. Let's do a quick demonstration. Let's grab our rectangle tool and draw a small rectangle. Notice the rectangle that we just created has a white fill and no stroke. When we deselect this guy, we won't be able to see it. So let's go right here to get our default stroke and fill, which is white and black, and let's create a couple of other rectangles very quickly. Alright, so these guys are all independent paths, each one having its own position in the Layers panel. If we selected all these guys, let's get our selection tool quickly by holding down the V key, and then we'll drag a marquee to select all three of our rectangles. Now with these guys selected, we can move these, we could even change the fill color. And while they're all selected, it's not a problem. Well, at some point, it might be helpful to group these guys so you don't have to make sure they're all selected at the same time. To do that, what you're going to do is make sure that all of the objects that you want to add to the group are selected, and then you'll go up to the Object menu and choose Group. A shortcut on the PC is Control-G. On the Mac, it's Command-G. So we'll select that, and now you see a new layer called Group. If you open that layer by the twisty, you'll see that each individual item is now part of our group. Alright, so if we deselect, all we need to do is actually select one piece of our group, and all three of the items in the group are automatically selected, and we can move these around. Now that's a very handy feature, and here's something else that's handy. Let's take a look at the building over to the left that makes up our logo. If we select the building, or if we try to select the building, it appears that our layer is locked. So let's go ahead and check that out. We may need to unlock the layer because we couldn't select it. And now let's go back over and select this guy. Now is this a grouped object? Well, no, this is actually a compound path. This skyline was created with many different sized rectangles, and instead of grouping them together, they were combined as one object. Let's see the difference. Let's go ahead and collapse our layers. Make sure that Logo 2 is selected, and now let's create a similar object. Let's deselect that object, and let's grab our rectangle tool. Now if you selected this object before, you're going to have the right fill color and stroke color. If you didn't, let's just take a step back real quick. Let's grab the selection tool, and now once again select the object on the left. And the reason we're doing this is so we can automatically pick up the correct fill and the stroke. Alright, very good. Now deselect, and once again let's go over and select the rectangle tool. There's no real right or wrong way to do this, but what I would like for you to do is draw a series of rectangles, and your rectangles should overlap and they should all be varying sizes. Some will be taller and some will be shorter. Alright, so I have about 5 rectangles, and now what we want to do is actually make sure these are aligned to the bottom, and then instead of grouping these things together, we are going to create a compound path, which simply means take all of the rectangles and create one shape from all of them. Alright, so click the V key on your keyboard and drag a marquee to select all these rectangles. The first thing that we probably want to do is make sure they're aligned straight on the bottom. Look here in the control panel and see a quick link that will open the Align panel. The very last icon on the top row will allow you to align all of your selected objects vertically to the bottom. Very nice. Alright, now that the objects are lined up, we can make them one. But before we do that, what I want to do is make a duplicate copy, because there's actually 2 ways that you can do this. Alright, and I want to show you both. So with this object still selected, to make a duplicate copy on a PC, You can hold down your Alt key, Option on a Mac, and drag over. Now hold down your Shift key also, so when you create your copy, it's in a straight line and you don't have to worry about that. Let go of your mouse and then let go of your modifier keys. Alright, so there's a couple of different ways to combine paths. We'll deselect both. What we'll do first is go to the Window menu and go down to the Pathfinder panel and open this guy. This guy's been around forever. This allows us to combine multiple shapes. So let's use one of these first. What we'll do is work with this set of rectangles over to the left. With our selection tool, we're just going to drag to highlight all of these guys, right? And when those are selected, we can use this tool right here to unite all of those shapes into one shape. So let's click here, and just like that, all of the selected shapes have now been combined into one. What about these guys? Well, this time we'll do the same thing. Let's select these and let's use a different tool. If we look over here in the Tools panel, right here, about halfway down, you're going to see the Shape Builder tool. It may be hidden, and for me, the Live Paint Selection tool was active, but I know if I hold the mouse down, I'll be able to find the Shape Builder tool, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. When the Shape Builder tool is active, if you simply run your cursor along your selected shapes, you can get a compound path again. Alright? Very good. Let's click the V key on the keyboard, move these two guys together. If we hold down our Shift key, we don't have to worry about it getting out of line. And once again, we'll make a couple of duplicate copies by holding down the Alt on a PC and dragging, or Option on the Mac, and we'll just add the Shift key. And once again, to create the fourth segment of the skyline. Very nice, very nice. And we can close the Pathfinder panel. All right, let's get rid of our demo squares there. Take this guy and we'll use our left arrow key to nudge it into place and deselect. One last step. What we want to do is actually combine all these together, and why don't we just use the Shape Builder tool again. Let's drag over with our selection tool to select all four of these shapes. Let's be sure that the Shape Builder tool is selected, and then just run the Shape Builder tool over your selected objects, and then we'll have one object. Now, what I'm noticing is that it's highlighted in blue, so for me, that's a cue that this shape is in the logo one layer. That's fine for this demonstration, but if you wanted to stay organized, we could move it out. If we open the logo one layer, we'll find the thumbnail next to the path we want to move and just drag it and drop it down into logo 2, and now we'll see that it's highlighted red. Well, that wraps it up for lesson 6, where we learned how to convert our bitmap graphic to vector using the image trace command. We've also learned how to create grouped objects and compound paths using the Pathfinder panel and the Shape Builder tool.